Hey, Neelam, great to have you on. Great to see you.
Great to see you. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
So, just for all the folks out there, gotten to know Neelam over the last couple of years. Been just a great introduction through mutual friend, and just been a great friend, peer, mentor, all in the same breath over time. So it's just nice to have you on.
I am so grateful to be here and so grateful for our friendship. So excited to chat.
Let's quickly jump through some of your background for people who don't know it, because I think it's a really important persona everybody should know about. So maybe just a quick background from there, and then we'll get into some of the Instacart stuff as you go through it.
Awesome. Yeah. So Nilam Ganenthiran, I grew up in Toronto, live here now with my wife and two kids, and started my career at Procter and Gamble in marketing, did some sales roles, went to business school, then did management consulting, really focused on the grocery and retail sector, which I've been in since I was 16 years old, working at food basic stores. That inspired me to, join Instacart as a very early employee, as the first non-technical hire, employee 12. Didn't know what it would eventually become, but had the time of my life building that company over 8 years. Ended up as president of the company, left Instacart and joined one of our largest investors, which was a crossover fund called D1 Capital, where I worked on the privates team and got to work directly with over 95 portfolio companies, ranging from everything from Stripe down to Kinder Spices, so tech and non-tech. And then about a year and a half ago, decided to start a company and had a paired up with a great co-founder, Divya Gupta, and started a company called Beacon Software that is headquartered here in Toronto about a year and a half ago.
Awesome. And maybe just add one more thing. What is Beacon? And then kind of just maybe the mission and model, because I think it's
Yeah,
super interesting.
thanks, Amar. Yeah, we are a holding company and we partner with great bootstrapped software entrepreneurs who have built mission critical niche software and developed great customer love amongst, kind of niche verticals that they serve. Could be everything from youth sports to campgrounds to K to 12 private schools to precast concrete manufacturers. And these software entrepreneurs really have done a great job scaling their business, but partner with Beacon and sell their company into Beacon as a holding company in order to increase the scale of their ambitions. Beacon then has a central tech stack, a central team that works directly with these entrepreneurs to try to take these businesses to the next level. And I'm very proud that today we work with over a dozen companies in this fashion.
Amazing. I think I've used two or three of your products without even knowing them
Yes.
through the course of my life. So it's pretty cool. Let's maybe get back a bit, just to repeat for folks your experience at 16 in the grocery business. Like let's break it down. How real is this? How awesome is this? Tell us a bit about that and how
Yeah.
it shaped you.
Yeah, so all throughout high school, I worked. So I grew up in Scarborough. For those of you listening from Toronto, and my first job, and still one of the jobs I learned the most from, was being a cashier at the local food basics store. And it was such a formative experience, Amar, because it was my first exposure to commerce. Right. So when you're a cashier, what you see, you're taking money from people who are buying a variety of different goods. So it was really cool from a human understanding perspective. I remember sales spiking that would tie to when government checks go out. I remember people showing up at the line with $800 worth of goods, but only having $200 in their pocket. So those were some of the kind of harder moments. But then I also saw the joy that came to parents' faces when they added a candy bar when their kids made a request. So like, I really just fell in love with this, very simple idea of how much joy food can bring to people and how it's so accessible to everyone. And then it was at that moment that I decided that I kind of wanted to build a career around food. I then had the opportunity to join Procter and Gamble as an intern. For those of you who don't know, Procter and Gamble is a very large consumer packaged goods company. I joined them in a sales role, used to sell into Zellers and then Walmart, and then moved into brand management and managed the Iams pet food brand here in Canada. I worked on Pampers along the way. And again, I had this direct feedback mechanism of you do something, you show up in a store, you see the product of your work, and then you see the delight that happens on a consumer's face when they touch and feel and buy your product. And it was very intoxicating. And then that led me to Instacart. The love of the grocery sector led me to Instacart, which was, I didn't know it at the time, but this gateway drug into tech, which opened my eyes into kind of what I'd call my second career. So,
Yeah. You skipped over business school.
yeah.
You say that lightly, casually. I don't think anything you did there was light or casual. So maybe just kind of give some of the mindset for folks on the why, where.
Yeah.
It's a really fantastic story.
Yeah, yeah. So in Procter and Gamble, I was contemplating moving to Cincinnati full time, which is headquarters. But I'd always had this idea and goal to get an MBA, which was a thing back then, and really had sort of decided that I was not going to be able to get into a great MBA school. Was pushed by my mom and my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, that hey, you should apply. If you don't apply, you're never going to do it, and this will be like an unchecked aspiration or unchecked dream on your list. And so I applied only to HBS, really mostly to satisfy, like, check a box. And I didn't think I'd get in. I was very fortunate to get in, and had a really eye-opening experience. As I mentioned, I grew up in Toronto. I went to school at York. So my worldview was very limited. Not that those aren't great places to grow up or go to school, but I don't mean this disparagingly, it was like provincial. I hadn't been exposed to people from other countries, people from different economic backgrounds, etc. So my view was more limited. And HBS was the first time I felt that I could hang with people who were outside of my little bubble.
So belief that you can do it was a big one, right? Just as I call it the playbook I wish I had for my kids, and it's taken from our parents' generation. You nailed it, right? It's like hats off to you. Really, really impressive on that. Maybe switching over to some of the Instacart stuff. What convinced you to take the leap into
Yeah.
this employee 12 in a name that was like a thing,
Yeah.
the thing?
Yeah, I actually started working with Apoorva, the founder of Instacart, back at the idea stage, before he was going to apply to YC. We were connected by a close personal friend who I met at business school. He was my neighbor at business school. His name's Rafael Corrales. He introduced us as Apoorva was looking for a non-technical co-founder. And I was in Cincinnati working for a large grocery chain there on behalf of a consulting firm. And I remember I like
There's
go,
only one
yeah,
grocery chain that maybe
exactly.
starts with K.
Exactly. Lots of Cincinnati connections here. So yeah, so I do that during the day. Then I'd go back to my hotel room and get on Skype, which also was a thing at that point, and talk to Apoorva about the idea that eventually became Instacart. I didn't at that moment decide to join full time or join him as kind of founding the company, because I was extremely risk averse. My wife and I were trying to start a family, and I didn't want to move to San Francisco. We stayed in touch, and 9 months later, the company had raised a seed. It was lining up its A. I was going on paternity leave with that child, who's now my almost 12 and a half year old. And I had a bunch of time because I hadn't taken any vacation in 4 years. I had this paternity leave accrued. So I started helping Apoorva, Max, and Brendan kind of on the side. And as I was doing that, I remember I flew to San Francisco. My daughter was about 3 weeks old, went there to kind of help them sort of as an advisor. They were headquartered in a house in South Park. I walk in wearing my dress pants, and I was 2 hours too early. No one was even in the office. And um, at the end of that week, I remember calling my wife and telling her, hey, I want to quit my job and do this thing full time. It was just such an adrenaline rush of being able to sit in a room, make a decision, and then see it ship, and then see it touch customers right away. And again, I think the last time I'd felt that was at a grocery store at Food Basics. So it was a real full circle moment for someone who had like pursued a very traditional corporate path of working in Fortune 500 and then management
Yeah.
consulting. So that adrenaline rush of deciding something, building it and shipping it was intoxicating. And it was really on that belief versus any sort of quantitative analysis that led me to join Instacart.
So just to double click on this and go one deeper, kind of fine-tune the prompt is probably the modern version of the book on this. You have every credential on paper. You have every experience in your youth and working world to do analysis. And from what I heard from you just now, it was a gut feel.
Yes, absolutely.
So maybe spend it just kind of gut feels and maybe some experiences in gut feel that have just been the right decisions for you, and maybe some of them aren't always correct, but they're just the right.
No, I'm so glad you picked up on it. That is something that I didn't realize until probably my late 30s. The value of trusting your intuition and actually valuing your intuition more strongly than the analysis. Here's my general view of these things. I think we spend a lot of our time as people who work the jobs we do, analyzing things and consuming a lot of information. All of that information is getting filtered into our subconscious, and that subconscious actually is forming our intuition and hardening our intuition. So when people, when we all use the word gut feel, it actually is just the accumulation of a bunch of stuff that we have either read or thought about in the shower or noodled on, but we can't at that moment draw a through line to if this, then that. But it actually is your brain doing that, in my opinion. And, and we'll talk about the Beacon experience later, but Beacon was very much a gut feel decision as well about where I felt I was going to derive the most personal value and satisfaction. And thus far, I've been very fortunate that that's been the case. But it was a bunch of simmering of a lot of thinking and analysis that had happened over the
Yeah.
course of years.
I love that because I think people underestimate that they look at somebody who's a bit older and they're like, what do you know about this? And it's like there's been a chiseling, a honing, a
Yeah.
hardening, and if it's in the right direction, the answer is clear. And sometimes I get these like, well, what do you think will happen next year? I go, I don't know, but I'll tell you in 5 years what will happen because I just have a sense of timelines and stuff. So it's kind of interesting. In your, I think it was 8 years you were at Instacart. The company went from, I don't know, you were
We were 28 million, and from a valuation perspective, in one city, San Francisco. When I joined, we didn't have a formed business model. When I left, we were valued at $39 billion in the private market. We're kind of across the country, had a north of 55 share of online groceries in North America. It's a great
wow.
ride. Yeah.
Let that sink in.
Yeah.
That's close to $39 billion of value creation. That's call it Hall of Fame stuff here. So really impressive. Were there any? And we talked about this on text recently. Is there any pivotal moments? Like I know the Whole Foods might have been one of those like like types of moments. Maybe share one or two of those.
Yeah. So, I would say Instacart was a funny journey, and maybe all of these journeys are like that. But it was funny in that we'd have a very good year followed by a very bad year, and I started expecting that. And you start to expect these curveball surprises out of nowhere. So to give you a couple of the curveballs, 2015 we had just raised a Series C. We were valued at $2 billion. Forbes magazine or Fortune magazine named us as the most promising company in America. I think we reached that valuation quicker than kind of most, or like at a crazy rate. It might have been
First.
yeah, yeah. And we felt like we were on top of the world. In my gut, I felt like a giant imposter, and we were burning a ton of money. We were pursuing growth at all costs. We were banking on the capital markets staying open forever, the private capital markets staying open forever. And then there was a little blip. The capital markets had closed. We found ourselves in a position where we were losing, and others have talked about this, so I feel more comfortable sharing now. We were losing $15 every delivery. So think about accelerating growth, but losing $15 each time you grow, meaning each incremental bag of groceries that went out, we were subsidizing, and that rate of subsidization was increasing. And again, we went to I remember a board meeting where we shared our results with the board, and we shared a bunch of slides on what was the only thing we thought mattered, which was growth. So really up and to the right, hockey stick growth. Their reaction was not what I expected in the moment, but it was exactly what we needed. and it's exactly what you think. We got smoked. I remember walking out of there. I still have a visceral feeling in my gut thinking about that moment. Um, and that resulted in us needing to do a lot of painful things, both in terms of reorganizing the company, but it was one of the best moments possible because it caused us to do the thing that we should have done from the start, which is build a durable business. So my lesson out of that was you can't punt it forever. You can't punt the idea of building a business forever.
Yeah.
Businesses exist to make money, and that's hard. By definition, it's hard. So that was one pivotal moment. And then, every 2 years, there was another one. There was the Whole Foods one you mentioned. There was COVID. There was, some were good, some were bad. Yeah.
What a journey, what a ride. That's a great one. Right? You're just like, oh man, this didn't go well. Uh, and it forces the action, right? And the action is where you get the next phases for you as groups. From there, D1, obviously a very prominent investor. What did you glean in from being an investor there, and what kind of got you there? Maybe
Yeah.
maybe just a quick one there.
Yeah, it was such a fantastic experience. D1 was the second largest private investor in Instacart. I developed a close personal relationship, and he's very much a mentor and a friend with the founder and CIO. His name's Dan Sundheim. He's a legendary investor. I had the privilege of getting to talk to Dan frequently when I was working at Instacart, and I found him to be the most thoughtful, most intellectually rigorous, investor. And I learned a ton from him. And I remember going to his house as I was thinking about a career transition and talking to him about, hey, I'm thinking about becoming a venture capitalist. I'm laughing as I say it because it's like just such a bad fit for me. I'm thinking about becoming a venture capitalist. I'm thinking about joining firm X or firm Y. How would you advise me to think about it as a friend? And those discussions led to Dan suggesting that maybe there's a home for me at D1, which was this kind of tremendous crossover fund. So they started their heritage and was in the public markets, a long short public fund, and then they increasingly have built a tremendous franchise in the private markets. When I heard Dan say that, I'm like, wow, there is a tremendous business to be built here because as a founder or as an executive, I found the product that you have, your advice, your capital to be the most additive. So why not go and scale that and help a bunch of other founders with that as the platform? So I joined D1 with that as sort of the mission. Learned an incredible amount. It was still probably the highest slope learning environment because I think every single person who worked at D1 was and is smarter than me by a pretty dramatic kind of margin. I think I was lucky to join D1 at a point that I'd shed a bunch of my own imposter syndrome. I think if I joined a place like that earlier in my career, I would have just got smoked. I felt, again, I just was like a kid in a candy store just trying to learn about how investors think about things, right?
Let
I'd
me let me
invested.
let me
Yeah.
yeah, let me fine tune this prompt
Wait,
again. So you create $40 billion of worth for this firm. They're like, yeah, maybe you can come work here, and your humility is amazing. You're like, yeah, I have a ton to learn here, and I'm thinking they're in the back room going, oh my god, this is the best person ever.
it was very cool. Thank you very much for saying that. No, it's very cool for both of us. Anyway, I had a great time there. I was there for about a year and a half. Met excellent people who have become really close friends, but knew in my heart that very quickly I am not a full-time investor. I needed to go back to building a company. And that led to, hard conversations that ended up being great conversations with my boss, Dan. And I ended up leaving the firm and knowing that we would do something together, just not in that way. And that something ended up being Beacon.
Yeah, let's get that. Like you describe what Beacon is. Um, what's some of the challenges and opportunities that have just been front and center for you here? Because I know we met early on in the journey, and I was like, we've kind of walked through. Okay, you're starting at base zero again, and we're climbing the hills, right? So maybe just a quick piece there.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start on the positive side, and then we'll go to the challenges, which every different day is like five new ones, as you know. On the positive side, it is such a thrill and it is so intoxicating starting from zero. You are not tied to any previous decisions. You can spend far less time thinking about whose feelings might get hurt by a decision. And you can put all of your energy into what is the right decision in the moment, which is hard enough to nail versus a lot of the other stuff that ended up becoming a bigger and bigger share of my mind when I was running Instacart, and knock on wood, it's just, the thing I struggle with, Amar, which you and I have talked about privately, is like, how do you capture that and keep that as this thing gets bigger and bigger? Yeah.
Yeah. There's also, as you get through various chapters of these things, you know, folks become very close friends of yours, almost family like. You're
Yeah.
still operating a sports team, right? Like it's
Yeah.
always this. It's a
Yeah.
very interesting
Yeah.
dynamic. You gotta manage through all this stuff. So let's just run through some quick hits. Top two things of culture you think are important.
I think the first is just doing the work. I learned this from Dan. I remember it was a tough moment at the fund. We were, kind of the public markets were not great. And I remember being on a conference call with him, and there was a number of us on, and just the stoicism that comes from being a public market investor for that long and having ups and downs. That's something I've tried to capture. I did not have that at Instacart. And the answer through whether you're crushing it or you're getting smoked is the same thing. Just do the work.
Do the work.
It literally, you just show up, you put your pants on, do the work, and you know,
Do the work.
yeah,
Lunch pail.
uh,
You're still going
yeah.
home to diapers, right? So it's like,
Yeah. That's the first thing. And then the second thing, which I did a terrible job of at Instacart, which I've tried to, and there's so many things from that I'm trying to kind of learn from the past here. But the second thing is transparency and hyper transparency. Because I think transparency actually is love, because what you're doing is you're giving everyone the same shot of success. And as companies get bigger and bigger, whether purposefully or not, people, organizations, teams use information asymmetry as actually a point of leverage and a point of power, where the real power is like everyone should know what's going on. Of course, without like, not talking like confidential, sensitive stuff, but everyone should know what's going on, and everyone should have an equal right to be able to like have an opinion on something. It doesn't mean that opinion is the one that's going to carry the day.
I love this. The transparency is a, a red pill of love. I think this is really good one. People sometimes want to keep stuff guarded close, and I'm like, if you're not building in the open in this modern day, like you're gonna get past. That's kind of
Yeah.
been the thing I'm thinking about.
Yes.
Um, maybe quickly on some other items. So if there's a first time founder out there listening to this, like what are some of the tidbits that you can give them on choosing investors that end up being long-term cap table decisions and gotchas, and how to maybe avoid one or two of them?
Yeah, it's so funny. I think it goes back to the thing we were talking about earlier on trusting your instincts.
Yeah.
Ask yourself, during any fundraise process, you're so desperate to get the other side to say yes, even if you have a ton of leverage. That's truly what's going through your head, right? You're just trying to get them to say yes. Then you're like, I'll figure it out later. The question I have learned to ask myself, which has made everything so much simpler, is will I be happy making this person a ton of money? And
Ooh.
if the answer is no, they shouldn't be on your cap table.
Wow, that's like dig into that. This is like a true unlock.
So, I sat on a number of board. I do, and I have observed that life is so much simpler when you're disagreeing with your investors, which eventually will happen if you like the person at the other end of the table. And I think people like undervalue this, or maybe it's like something that not, maybe it's just not true, but it's true to me. I want my investors, they don't necessarily need to be friends, but I need to respect them such that I will be happy for them if they win.
This is so important. I spend a lot of time now with founders early on, and they reach out to you and I all the time. It's like I go, you have to do the reference call, and if you're calling a like yourself or myself or somebody, it's like ask the tough questions, see what the
Yeah.
responses are. Because if you don't ask up front and you end up in a situation down the road, you missed your window to ask that question and get some candid feedback on some stuff. Because everybody with a checkbook or a wire or some kind of is an angel and a saint at the start.
Yes.
but you're getting into a relationship that's probably one of the most intimate in your life, and you really got to respect. I like the respect of the person on the other end. That's a really good one. Maybe a couple last ones here. You're using Mantle for your cap table management.
Absolutely. We're
We are grateful
very
to have
happy
you.
customers.
Anything specific on the platform you like that you'd want to share with folks?
We've used other platforms, both at Beacon as well as elsewhere in my journeys. I can say without a doubt, Mantle has been the easiest platform for us to onboard into, and we onboarded off of a different competitive platform. And it has been the most intuitive. We get the least questions from our diverse and high scrutiny cap table about, about the things that they need to know. And if you think about what I'm trying to solve for with cap table management, I don't want to get questions, right? I just want everything to be there, because anything that isn't there is an additional drain on my brain or my team's brain. So Mantle has been, I mean, I couldn't recommend it more highly. It's tremendous.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And just for
I think it's
context,
sorry, just one thing. I think, and you are a consummate product connoisseur and builder, but I'm not. And I've started to, over time, you start to find the editorial insights of the founder in the product, and you can tell the care that went into it. So
appreciate it. I know we're coming up on time here, so appreciate all the time you spent and the insights. And I think it's been incredibly insightful for me to hear some of the stuff, which is why I was kind of referred to you as friend, peer mentor in the same breath. So appreciate that. Thank you.
thank you, Amar.